A black man was relaxing in his own backyard when a white neighbor accused him of trespassing and called 911. What the officers found, and what the cameras recorded, flipped the whole neighborhood upside down. DeAndre Wilkins was tired. Not exhausted. The kind of tired that settles in your bones after a long work trip when you're just craving quiet. He pulled into the driveway of his single-story home on Echo Street in Bakersfield, California. It was a little past 1 p.m. on a Thursday. The sun was steady, the sidewalk empty, and his dog Milo barked from behind the front door as if he knew his guy was home early. He unlocked the door, dropped his carry-on by the entryway, and knelt to hug Milo. A short, thick brindle with a soft growl and a stubby tail, Milo did his usual circle dance, then bolted to the backyard. DeAndre followed him out with a glass of cold tea and his portable speaker, cueing up some Dexter Gordon. Smooth, low saxophone notes eased into the air. This was his favorite part of owning a home, the backyard. A little square of earth that was his. 5 years ago, he'd bought the place after saving for what felt like forever. At 32, he was proud of what he'd built for himself. He didn't throw loud parties. He paid his taxes. He kept the lawn clean. That Thursday felt like a reward for all of it. No Zoom meetings, no emails. Just him, the sun, Milo, and Jazz. He was halfway through his drink when he noticed a woman approaching the back fence. She wore a beige sun visor, oversized sunglasses, and had one of those neck fans swinging from a lanyard. She looked out of place, not just because he'd never seen her before, but because she wasn't walking past his yard. She was walking toward it. DeAndre turned the volume down a notch and stood up. "Afternoon," he said, politely, just loud enough for her to hear. The woman didn't return the greeting. "What exactly are you doing here?" she asked, voice sharp. "This is private property." DeAndre blinked, confused. "Ma'am, this is my property." She frowned. No, it's not. I know who lives here, and it's definitely not you." He let out a short laugh, not mocking, just in disbelief. "I've lived here for 5 years. I can go get my license or mail if you need proof." She didn't budge. Her hand hovered near her phone. "I'm calling the police," she said. "There's a suspicious man in the backyard." Milo let out a low bark from the patio. DeAndre reached out calmly to hold him back. "You're seriously calling 911 on me? On my own property?" he asked, still trying to stay even-keeled. "You can explain yourself to the officers," she snapped. Then, with her phone angled in her palm, she dialed. DeAndre stood still. He wasn't about to make a move that would look threatening. His heart started to thump harder, not because he was scared of her, but because he'd seen this movie before, too many times. From her end of the call, he could hear fragments. "Yes, Bakersfield. Yes, right now. Blackmail, trespassing. Yes, armed. I'm not sure. He has a dog." DeAndre couldn't help but look directly into her face. "You're lying. You know I live here." But she kept talking. Within minutes, he heard sirens. Multiple. He didn't expect them to arrive so fast, but they did. He grabbed his wallet, walked around the side of the house, and stood in front with his hands visible. Milo stayed inside. 2 squad cars pulled up. Doors opened fast. "Sir, stay where you are," one of the officers shouted. DeAndre raised both hands slowly. "I live here. I can prove it." But the tension had already landed like a weight in the middle of the block. A few neighbors peeked out from windows, some from behind their doors. He could feel every pair of eyes, not on the woman who made the call, but on him. But before any explanations could begin, the next few minutes would set off a chain of events neither of them could take back. One of the officers, a tall man in khaki with a shaved head and mirrored sunglasses, stepped forward first. His hand hovered near his holster, but he didn't draw. The other, shorter and stockier, took position just behind him, scanning the yard like they were preparing for something bigger. DeAndre kept his voice even. "My name is DeAndre Wilkins. I live here. This is my house. I can show you ID and mail with this address." The taller officer gave a small nod but didn't relax. "Sir, do you have that identification on you right now?" "Yeah," DeAndre said, slowly reaching into his pocket. "Right here." He pulled out his wallet, careful not to make any sudden moves. The officer stepped closer and took the license, glancing between it and the address over the mailbox. Carolyn Dittmer came around the corner then, holding her phone like a badge of honor. "Officers, thank you for coming. I caught him in the backyard. He was acting suspicious, and I've never seen him before." The second officer turned toward her. "Ma'am, do you live on this street?" "Yes," she said quickly. "I live just across the alley. I walk by this house every day." DeAndre raised an eyebrow. "So you don't live on this street, and you admit you were on my property?" Carolyn ignored him. "I know the woman who used to live here. She was an older lady. Sweet, he's not the owner. Look at him, he doesn't belong here." That one sentence, those 6 words, they said more than she probably realized. The taller officer turned back to DeAndre. "Sir, can we step inside the house so you can show us mail or a deed?" DeAndre nodded. "Yeah, I've also got a doorbell camera. Footage is all there." He led the 2 officers into the living room. Carolyn tried to follow. "You're not coming inside my home," he said, standing in her way. "You've already done enough." The officer blocked her path with one hand. "Ma'am, we don't need you in there." DeAndre walked to the kitchen counter and picked up 2 pieces of unopened mail addressed to him at that exact address. Then he pulled up the security app on his phone and started scrolling to the footage. Carolyn walking up, accusing him, dialing 911. He showed the officers. The room was quiet except for the faint jazz still playing in the background. After a beat, the taller officer exhaled slowly. "All right, this does check out." The shorter one glanced at the footage and then at the door. "We'll have a word with her outside." They stepped out front and DeAndre followed, pausing only to lock his door behind him. Carolyn stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed. "Well, what's the verdict?" she asked, almost smugly. The taller officer walked over to her. "Ma'am, Mr. Wilkins owns this home. He has valid ID, mail, and recorded video showing exactly what happened." Carolyn's face twitched. "But he doesn't look like—" "That's enough," the officer interrupted. "You made a false report. You also trespassed onto private property." Her mouth opened. "Wait, I trespassed? I was protecting the neighborhood." "You crossed onto his yard without permission. That's trespassing," he repeated. "You're lucky he's not pressing charges right now." DeAndre watched as her posture changed. That certainty she had when she dialed the phone, when she thought the system was on her side, was starting to slip. "I'm going to speak with the HOA," she muttered. "They'll hear about this." "I'm sure they will," DeAndre said. "And so will everyone else once I post the video." She turned and walked away, stiff steps, muttering under her breath. The officers gave DeAndre one last look. "Sorry about the misunderstanding," the taller one said. DeAndre didn't respond. He just nodded once and walked back toward his door. But this wasn't going to end with a nod and a closed door. What happened next would take things far beyond the neighborhood. Inside, DeAndre stood still in his foyer, staring at the door he'd just locked behind him. Milo came padding up, ears low, sensing the shift in energy. DeAndre bent down to pet him, his fingers pressing into the thick fur like he was grounding himself. His hands were still warm, not from the heat, but from adrenaline. He grabbed his phone again and re-watched the doorbell footage. It was all there. The tone in Carolyn's voice, the way she looked around like she was waiting for backup, the way she stepped into his yard like it belonged to her. Even the moment she called 911, her voice steady, accusing, and full of certainty. And that last part, where the officer told her she was trespassing, priceless. DeAndre uploaded the footage to the cloud, saved a copy to a USB, and then sat down. He didn't know if he was going to post it, not yet. But he wasn't going to let it sit in silence either. That night, he called his sister in Fresno. "You're not going to believe what happened," he said. He told her everything, from the moment Carolyn appeared to the way the officers questioned him like he was an intruder in his own home. "You recorded it, right?" she asked. "I did, all of it." "You need to post that. People need to see." DeAndre paused. "I don't want this turning into some viral thing. I just wanted a day to myself. Now I gotta think about lawyers?" She was quiet for a second. Then, "You didn't ask for this. But if you stay silent, she wins twice. You're not the first guy this happened to. You might be the first one who can actually prove it." That stuck with him. The next morning, DeAndre edited the clip. No music, no flashy effects, just raw footage with a short caption. She told me to leave my own house, then called the cops. He posted it to Facebook first. He figured maybe friends would see it, people who knew him. Maybe it would spark some conversation. By noon, it had over 3,000 shares. By 3 p.m., someone had reposted it to Twitter, and a local Bakersfield activist group tagged him in a comment. This is why people keep cameras on their porches. This is why it matters. By the time he made dinner, a local journalist had emailed asking for an interview. He declined. But by then, it didn't matter. The video was out in the wild. Someone from his high school he hadn't spoken to in 10 years texted him, "Bro, I saw you on Instagram. Are you okay?" Another person commented under the video, "My cousin had something like this happen in Modesto." No proof, though. They didn't believe him. By Friday morning, Channel 23 News had run a segment on the story. They blurred Carolyn's face, but not her voice. Her words echoed across the screen like they were being broadcast straight out of people's living rooms. "He doesn't belong here." It was surreal. DeAndre had gone from a quiet backyard afternoon to becoming a face for something much bigger. It wasn't a role he'd auditioned for, but it had found him anyway. He didn't hear from Carolyn again that weekend. No apology, no note on the door, just silence from across the alley. But the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like distance, like lines had been drawn in a place where neighbors used to wave and keep it moving. But that silence was about to break. And this time, the whole neighborhood would hear it. Saturday morning, DeAndre was watering the lawn when a white SUV slowed in front of his house. The driver, a woman in her early 50s with short curls and bright eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses, rolled down her window. "You're DeAndre, right?" she asked, voice friendly but careful. He nodded. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Loretta McKinnon. I live 2 streets over. I saw your video. I just wanted to say thank you for putting it out there." DeAndre lowered the hose. "You're welcome, I guess. Wasn't really planning on all this attention." "I get that," she said. "But it hit me hard. We've been here since '92. My husband passed last year, and I've had more people second-guess me in this neighborhood lately than in the last decade combined." She looked down, then back up. "I know what it's like to feel like you have to prove you belong somewhere. And I'm sorry that happened to you. If you ever need anything, seriously, you're not alone." He gave her a small nod. A real one this time. That was the first kind gesture he'd received since the video blew up. But it wasn't the last. By Monday, 3 more neighbors approached him. Quietly, carefully. A man named Tyrell, a retired Navy vet who'd lived on Echo Street for 17 years. A white couple in their 40s who said they were embarrassed they hadn't stepped in when they saw the police cars. But with every show of support, there were glances too. Awkward ones. Eyes that darted away when he walked by. Conversations that stopped when he got too close. And then there was the flyer, taped to the neighborhood mailbox, printed in bold letters. "Know who lives in your neighborhood." Below it, a screenshot of the video. DeAndre's face mid-sentence. Someone had scribbled a question mark on his forehead in pen. He stood there staring at it for a few seconds, lips pressed tight. He ripped it down without a word and walked back to his porch. Milo followed, tail swaying, unaware of the weight in the air. Later that evening, a knock came at the door. It was Officer Delgado, the same shorter cop from the incident. "Mind if I talk to you for a minute?" he asked. DeAndre stepped aside. Delgado glanced around, then sat on the edge of the porch steps. "Just wanted to check in," he said. "Look, I've seen your video. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't look bad. It does. I can't speak for Officer Langston, but we're not trained to assume guilt. That's not how it should go. But I know it felt that way." DeAndre sat on the top step, arms resting on his knees. "Felt that way because that's exactly how it went." Delgado nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right. And I'm not going to defend that. But I wanted to let you know, this whole thing, it's made the department look at our response procedures. There's going to be a review." DeAndre raised an eyebrow. "You here on official business, or just trying to cover ground before the media keeps pushing this?" Delgado exhaled. "A little of both, maybe. But also, as a person, I hate how it played out. And I wish we could have done better. They sat there in silence for a moment. Then Delgado stood up. One more thing, he said, reaching into his pocket. The department got a letter. Anonymous. Same handwriting as the mailbox flyer. They're treating it seriously. He handed over a photo of the letter. Blocky, all caps. This neighborhood doesn't need troublemakers. DeAndre stared at it. He wasn't sure what bothered him more, the cowardice of it, or the fact that someone thought he was the problem. Delgado paused. Just keep your cameras rolling, and call us if anything happens. Seriously. As he walked back to his cruiser, DeAndre looked around. The block was quiet. No kids playing, no lawnmowers, no casual hellos. Just a simmering tension behind closed blinds. But pressure doesn't stay bottled forever, and the neighborhood was about to boil over in ways no one expected.
By Tuesday, the video had crossed the line between local incident and national conversation. It was reposted by a well-known civil rights advocate on Instagram. A blue-check journalist, quote, tweeted it with the caption, "You can own a house, a mortgage, a title, and still be treated like a suspect." Within hours, it was picked up by several online publications. Outlets from Los Angeles to Minneapolis ran headlines like, "Man confronted at his own home in California suburb," and "Caught on camera. Neighbor calls cops on black homeowner." DeAndre didn't ask for this. He didn't want a movement, didn't want news vans. But that didn't matter anymore. The story had taken on a life of its own. He started getting DMs from strangers. A woman in Nevada wrote, "I've lived in my house for 12 years. My neighbor still introduces me to people like I'm new. Thank you for speaking up." A young guy in Tulsa messaged, "They told me I looked out of place in my own neighborhood after I went jogging. This hit home, man." Even a man from Connecticut wrote, "White guy here. I watched your video 3 times. I can't lie. 5 years ago, I might have thought like her, but now, I see it. I see what you're dealing with. I'm sorry." Every message added weight to something DeAndre hadn't asked to carry. He wasn't a public figure. He wasn't trying to go viral. He was just trying to enjoy a day off in his own damn backyard. The tipping point came on Thursday. That's when Channel 12 sent a crew to Echo Street. A young field reporter knocked on his door with a mic and a camera operator in tow. "Mr. Wilkins, I know you haven't done interviews, but this story matters. We're doing a piece on racial profiling in suburban neighborhoods. Would you be willing to share your side on camera?" DeAndre hesitated, not because he didn't have anything to say, but because he wasn't sure if people would really listen. Then he thought of Carolyn, still walking around the block like she hadn't done anything wrong, still carrying herself with that same air of certainty. He stepped out onto the porch. "I'll give you 5 minutes." That evening, the clip aired. DeAndre stood there, plain clothes, speaking clearly, no anger in his voice, just tired truth. "I didn't yell, I didn't threaten, I didn't trespass. I sat in my backyard and listened to music. That's all I did. And for that, someone saw me as a threat." The segment aired during prime time. By morning, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. An attorney named Simone Lackey reached out via email. She specialized in civil rights litigation and offered a free consultation. "I'm not saying you have to sue," she wrote. "But what happened to you wasn't just wrong. It was illegal." DeAndre stared at her message for a while. The idea of taking legal action wasn't new. His sister had brought it up the night it all happened. But now it felt real, possible, maybe even necessary. And it wasn't just the legal side. The HOA had started receiving complaints. A few neighbors were pushing to have Carolyn removed from her committee seat. Whispers circled that she'd been part of several confrontations over the years, but this was the first time it had gone public. The neighborhood Facebook group had exploded. Posts were being deleted, arguments breaking out in comment threads. Some supported DeAndre. Others claimed the video was misleading or taken out of context. One post read, "This kind of drama is why we moved here in the first place, to avoid it." DeAndre screenshot it. He didn't reply, but he felt every syllable like a slap. That weekend, A small group gathered outside his house. Some held signs that said, "We stand with DeAndre." Others just brought folding chairs and sat quietly on the sidewalk like they were keeping watch. He offered them water. Talked with a few. Learned one woman had driven in from Visalia just to show support. "This kind of thing doesn't stay quiet anymore," she said. "And it shouldn't." DeAndre nodded slowly. He was starting to see the bigger picture, but seeing it clearly and deciding what to do with it were two very different things, and the pressure to act was only growing stronger. By the start of the next week, DeAndre felt like a man caught between two identities: his normal life and the symbol the internet had made him into. He still took Milo on his morning walks, still trimmed his hedges every Saturday, but now, people slowed down when they drove by. Some waved, some stared. A few didn't even bother hiding the way they whispered. The neighborhood, which once felt ordinary, now felt on edge. It wasn't just about the video anymore. It was what the video represented. People were forced to look at themselves, their neighbors, the dynamics they'd always ignored. And not everyone liked what they saw. At the next HOA meeting, held at the local rec center instead of the usual members' home due to public interest, the room was packed. DeAndre didn't plan on speaking. He sat in the back corner in a plain shirt, ball cap low, trying to blend in. But the moment Carolyn Dittmer stood up, he knew that wasn't going to be an option. She cleared her throat, stood tall, and launched right into it. "I want to address the rumors and the attacks on my character," she said. "What I did was out of genuine concern. I didn't know who that man was, and I called the authorities as a precaution. I've lived here for over a decade. I take pride in protecting this neighborhood." Murmurs moved through the room. One older man spoke up. "You didn't know him because you never tried to. You assumed the worst, and now you're blaming everyone else for how it turned out." Carolyn stiffened. "Excuse me, but I was raised to be alert. We all know what this neighborhood has been like lately." DeAndre stood before he even realized he'd moved. "You mean what I've been like lately?" he asked calmly, voice cutting through the noise. All eyes shifted to him. "You walked onto my property. You accused me. Lied to the police. You didn't ask questions, you made assumptions. And now you're standing here trying to spin it like you were the one attacked?" Carolyn folded her arms, tight-lipped. Another board member, Sandra Alvarez, a longtime resident and local librarian, spoke up. "I've been quiet because I wanted to hear both sides," she said. "But after watching the footage and listening to this, it's clear what happened. Carolyn, this wasn't about concern. This was about control and fear." Several people nodded. Someone in the back clapped once, then stopped. Carolyn muttered something under her breath and sat down, cheeks burning red. The board chair took a moment, then looked at DeAndre. "Mr. Wilkins, would you be open to meeting with the board separately to discuss what kind of action, if any, you'd like us to consider?" He nodded slowly. "I will." The meeting adjourned shortly after, but outside the rec center, a small group gathered near the parking lot. DeAndre recognized some faces. Neighbors who'd always waved politely, never said much beyond that. Tonight they were talking. A man named Wesley, retired, usually reserved, walked over to him. "I'll be honest, DeAndre. I used to think that stuff didn't happen here. Thought it was all just internet drama. Then I saw that footage. Heard what she said. Made me sick." DeAndre appreciated the honesty. "Thanks. Means a lot." Wesley paused. "If you ever want to speak to the neighborhood association, not just the board, let me know. Some folks want to hear from you directly." He hadn't thought of that. Back home, he paced the living room. Could he really become that guy? The one who stands up, speaks out, and changes minds? It wasn't just about him anymore. The messages, the flyers, the silent neighbors, all of it meant something bigger was stirring. Milo curled at his feet, calm as ever. DeAndre looked down at his phone. Another message, this one from a youth outreach group. They wanted him to come speak at a local high school. He rubbed the back of his neck, unsure. But with each door that opened, it became harder to go back to just being silent, and what came next would demand a choice he couldn't ignore. DeAndre sat in the back booth of a quiet cafe just off Stockdale Highway, tapping his thumb against the edge of his cup. Across from him sat Simone Lackey, the civil rights attorney who had reached out a week earlier. She had that sharp, attentive look lawyers seem to master. But her tone was calm, measured. "I know you didn't plan on becoming the center of all this," she said. "But what happened to you was real. It wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a civil rights violation." DeAndre sighed. "I keep thinking, if I go through with legal action, what does that say? That I'm looking for money? That I'm stirring the pot?" Simone leaned in slightly. "No, it says you're holding someone accountable, and maybe making space for the next person to be treated better." He looked out the window. A group of high school kids were crossing the street, laughing, unaware of the weight sitting in his chest. "I'm not even angry anymore," he said. "Just tired. Tired of explaining that I belong. Tired of thinking ahead every time I leave the house. Now I gotta decide if I want to be the guy who sues the HOA and the city? That's a lot." "It is," she said. "But not doing anything is a choice, too. And that has its own weight." Back home, the neighborhood seemed quieter than usual. Not the peaceful kind, just muted. Like everyone was waiting to see what DeAndre would do. He sat on his porch that evening, Milo at his feet again, watching a group of kids ride scooters down the sidewalk. That's when his phone rang. "Hello? Hi, this is April Stanton. I'm with the Echo Street Unity Committee. We're putting together a community forum. Some residents felt like now might be a good time for honest conversations. We'd love for you to be part of it. Just talk." Nothing formal. DeAndre hesitated. "Is Carolyn going to be there?" A pause. "She was invited, but she declined." He figured she would. "I'll think about it," he said. "Of course. No pressure. It's this Sunday evening at the old community church. We're just trying to build bridges." When Sunday came, he parked in the back of the small brick church off Bernard Street. Rows of folding chairs were set up inside. No pulpit, no microphones. Just people. Maybe 50 or 60 neighbors, some he knew, some he didn't. Sandra Alvarez gave a brief welcome, then opened the floor. DeAndre didn't raise his hand at first. He listened. A few people shared stories. Some about their own experiences with judgment or silence. Some about how they never thought something like this could happen right on their street. When a young woman stood up and said, "I never knew what microaggression meant until I saw that video," he finally cleared his throat. "I'll say something," he said. All heads turned. He stood slowly and walked to the front. "I didn't post that video to start a fight. I just didn't want to be erased," he began. "I've worked hard to be where I am. I bought that house with my own money. And I got accused of being a criminal because someone didn't recognize me, didn't want to recognize me." He looked around the room. "This isn't just about Carolyn. It's about how fast people are to believe the worst when someone doesn't look like them. How easy it is to pick up the phone before asking a single question." Some folks nodded. A few looked down. "I'm not perfect. I've probably made my own assumptions in life. But if this situation taught me anything, it's that silence can be louder than words. So I'm speaking." A few people clapped softly. Then others joined in. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to him. Some shook his hand. Others just offered a quiet, "Thank you." He walked back to his car, feeling something he hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. He still didn't know if he was going to sue, but he knew this. He wasn't going to shrink himself for anyone, not anymore. But standing tall comes with a cost. And the final choice would define more than just his own story. Word about the community forum spread fast, not because it was advertised, but because people talked. The ones who showed up that night left with something they hadn't expected, a story that stuck with them, a face they could no longer ignore. The next day, DeAndre received an email from a history teacher at Bakersfield High. "My students saw the clip from your speech. Would you consider speaking to our senior civics class? They're having a hard time believing these things still happen in 2025. Your story might make it real for them." He stared at the message for a while. He hadn't expected any of this. But slowly, piece by piece, it was becoming clear that staying quiet wasn't an option anymore. So he said, yes. The classroom was warmer than he expected. Sunlight poured in through half-open blinds. The students looked half-interested at first, some yawning, some glued to their phones. But when he started talking, their eyes lifted. "I'm not a politician. I'm not an activist," he told them. "I'm a guy who went home to play jazz in his yard and ended up being told I didn't belong on my own property." He told them about the phone call, the police showing up, the mail, the camera, the way silence can sometimes feel like violence too. One student raised her hand. "Do you think she really believed you didn't live there? Or was she just pretending?" DeAndre thought about that for a second. "I think she believed what she wanted to believe. That's the dangerous part. People don't always see what's real. They see what makes them feel in control." Another student leaned forward. "What would have happened if you didn't have a camera?" DeAndre didn't answer right away. "That's a question I've been asking myself ever since. And honestly, I don't know. But I do know I wouldn't be standing in front of you." The class went quiet. Afterwards, a few of the students came up and thanked him. One kid shook his hand and said, "I'm going to ask my dad some real questions tonight." That stayed with DeAndre. Back at home, he found a letter taped to his door. No stamp. No name. Just a note written in careful cursive. "I watched your speech. I didn't clap that night because I didn't know how. But I'm learning. And I'm sorry. A neighbor." He stood there on the porch, letter in hand, staring out at the street. It looked the same, but it felt different now. Not healed, but shifting. Later that week, Simone called him again. "Just checking in," she said. "Any thoughts about the legal side?" "I'm thinking," he replied. "But I also think there's something more powerful than just dragging someone through court." Simone paused. "Like what?" "Making sure they can't ignore it anymore. Not just Carolyn. All of them. The people who thought what happened was okay, or didn't think about it at all." He'd started keeping a notebook. Every message, every story someone shared with him since the video went public. He wrote it down, and as the pages filled, he started to see a pattern. This wasn't rare. This wasn't a fluke. It was just the first time someone caught it on camera and refused to back down. A month after the incident, the HOA sent out a community-wide announcement. Carolyn Dittmer had stepped down from her role. No explanation, just a brief formal notice. She never apologized. DeAndre didn't expect one. Some neighbors still kept their distance. Others had warmed. A few asked him to grab coffee or speak at their churches. He wasn't trying to become a spokesperson, but he understood now. Sometimes just telling the truth out loud is a kind of leadership, but truth without action fades. And there was one final thing DeAndre needed to say before this chapter closed. One evening, about 5 weeks after everything began, DeAndre stood on his back patio again. Same chair, same speaker, same old jazz. Milo was stretched out nearby, eyes half closed, snoring softly. The yard looked just like it always had. But to DeAndre, it didn't feel the same anymore. He took a sip from a cold glass and opened his notebook, a fresh page. Blank. He thought about writing a speech. Something powerful, something polished. But instead, he picked up his phone and hit record. This time, it wasn't for the news or a forum or a classroom. It was just him. "Hey," he said into the camera. "It's DeAndre. I've been quiet the past few days thinking, trying to figure out how to wrap my head around all this." He paused. "I didn't plan to be anyone's lesson. I didn't ask to become a viral headline. I just wanted to sit in my backyard. That's it. I wanted to listen to music with my dog. And someone decided that was suspicious. Someone decided I didn't look like I belonged in the house I worked for, saved for, paid for, and lived in." He shifted in his seat. "You can talk about laws, about policies, about bias training. But at the end of the day, this comes down to something simpler. It's about how we see each other, or how we refuse to." He looked at the screen, expression steady. "You don't have to like everyone. You don't have to understand everyone's background or story. But what you can't do is decide someone's value or their rights based on what makes you feel comfortable." He paused again, his voice quieter now. "There are so many people walking around with their guard up. People who feel like they've got to explain why they exist in certain spaces. That kind of pressure, it wears you down, slowly, quietly, until moments like mine happen, and suddenly you can't ignore it anymore." He let out a slow breath. I'm not a victim, but I'm also not going to pretend like what happened didn't hurt. It did. It still does. But maybe that hurt means something if it wakes people up. If it forces one neighbor, one student, one coworker to think before they assume. He leaned back, letting the silence hang for a moment before ending the recording. He didn't post it right away. He just saved it. A record of how he felt in that moment, without edits or filters. A few days later, he uploaded it to his page. No hashtags, no caption, just the video. The response wasn't massive, but it was real. Comments trickled in. I needed to hear this. Thank you for saying what most of us are too tired to explain. My dad watched this and didn't say a word. That means more than you know. DeAndre didn't feel victorious. This wasn't a win, but it was a start. He saw what it looked like when people stopped pretending things were fine and started having real conversations. He didn't press charges. He didn't sue. But he worked with a local housing rights group to set up monthly meetups in Bakersfield. Open talks between neighbors, law enforcement, educators. The first one drew 12 people. The third had over 30. He kept the notebook, filled more pages, stories, names, thoughts, plans, and he kept his jazz speaker. Because that backyard? That was still his. Sometimes change doesn't come with a bang. Sometimes it shows up in tired voices finally being heard, in new eyes meeting yours without suspicion, in silence that starts to break open. If this story made you think, even just a little, then let it be the start of something. Speak up. Ask better questions. Be a better neighbor. And, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories to tell, and we're just getting started.